Ready? Hi, good evening everyone, and thank you for coming to the October 15th meeting of the Adelaide Central School District. I think we'll start with introductions. Mary, would you like to start?
Mary Gill.
Mary Cullinane.
Chip Malcolm.
Victoria Jetty. Peg Martin.
Steve Warzak.
Peter Burrows, Superintendent.
Suzanne.
Suzanne Buck.
From Chicago. Lorraine Morse.
Oh, Jen Newseater.
Perry Hansen.
Jory Jacobite.
Davina Damoy.
Vicki Wells, Assistant Superintendent of Student Services.
Would you like to introduce yourself, Caitlin?
Sure. Caitlin Steele, Director of Teaching and Learning.
Great. Thank you all for coming tonight. And next, public comment, but it doesn't look like we have any public, so we will continue on with a recommendation to approve the minutes of October 1st.
So moved.
Harry moved. Oh, before we get any further, Suzanne is in Chicago, and I'm wondering, would somebody be willing to just jot down the notes and then we can send them to Suzanne?
You're going to try if you give me a piece of paper.
Even if I just have the, who does the motions and then the bill amounts,
Can I
can
put them on here?
Can you just,
Yeah, they won't be in any spectacular order.
Peg, did you want to do it, or?
Makes no, never mind. We can put them together.
Okay.
So.
So Suzanne knows how much she's missed.
So
Because
if
nobody
you
wants to
exactly.
go.
has graciously offered to take 2 minutes. And now I will take the from Perry, who made a motion to accept the minutes, and do I have a second?
Second.
Second
Okay.
from Mary. Any corrections, omissions, additions? I noticed a couple of small typos, but they're gonna fuss over.
We can clean up
Yes, later.
grammatical typos.
Anybody? Nope. No? Okay, seeing there's no corrections. All in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Uh,
I wasn't here.
Abstention from Chip. Thank
Okay.
you. Okay. Moving along, we're on to report of approving of the ACSD bills. Chip?
There are two bills, two sets of bills on 10/8/18. Victoria and I read them. There was a total of $181,563.09. In the general fund, $38,281.89 in payroll expenses for a total of $219,844.98. And today's bills, again read by Victoria and myself, was the district, the general fund, $479,431.44, and payroll expenses of $1,034,508.60 for a total of $1,513,940.04. And I move we pay the bills.
Second.
All in favor of accepting the bills as presented by Chip, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay. Thank you, Chip and Victoria. Appreciate it. I'll apologize in advance, I have a cold, so if I start hacking, just I'll try to keep it to a minimum. Report of the board. Our first discussion item is the FY20 budget development. Peter, I don't know if you're starting, or the budget committee?
I can start, you guys can start.
Yeah, I think, why don't you start and then we
Okay.
can pipe in.
So at the end of the last meeting, the board discussed budget development and specifically talking about budget parameters going into next year. Just to refresh everyone on timeline, we're working towards a first draft on December 17th of the budget. That's right after we get our equalized pupil count on the 15th. And so our goal is to provide a first draft that's a real draft of the budget as opposed to hypotheticals that we then completely redo when we get our equalized people number. As I've discussed previously, I've been working with our leaders to start to talk about what's happening in their schools this year and needs for next year. We are looking at enrollment. We're looking at all of the roll-up costs that we know about, and we're trying to see kind of where do we stand right now. I met individually with every principal with Brittany before she left, and she still hasn't had the baby yet. Any moment. And she's going to be coming back online in, I think it's the end of November, early December, to start from home, taking on the budget process, and then she'll be joining us again in January when she returns. So really this is kind of an information gathering period. And when we left the meeting in Weybridge in discussing the budget, the Finance Committee had talked a bit about budget parameters and what they meant. So in the last hour, the Budget Committee, or the Finance Committee rather, discussed kind of what the, how to talk about the budget parameters with the full board to give you a sense of what it means when the board says we're comfortable with a 3% increase in equalized pupil cost. And that's, equalized pupil cost is the metric that we use in funding education. That there's a sense of what that means, and also an understanding of where that puts us in relation to what we're spending now and what the excess spending threshold is. The excess spending threshold is set every year by the state, and it increases by the NEEP index, which is a consumer price index. And it can go up, it can be 1%, it could be 2%, it could be 3%, it's just depending on what the index is, and that's specific to New England. Generally, it's under 3%. Our rollover generally is over 3% when you look at salaries and other costs, healthcare, etc. That's keeping everything constant. So one of the things that we talked about in the Finance Committee, and I believe we talked about in our last meeting, was looking at where we are at $16,900 per equalized pupil right now, and looking at where the threshold is, which is $17,700. When you roll up the budget by equalized pupil, 3%, in 2 budget cycles, if that threshold stayed constant, you would be pretty much up to the threshold. And that's keeping equalized pupil constant. So one of the factors in the board setting a budget parameter for us, and this is really a starting point for us, and for me to have conversations with our principals and with others to start to put the budget together and develop thinking, is understanding how close do we want to go to that threshold. Because if we get up to the threshold, our choices are going to be either to increase beyond the threshold the following year, which most of our communities, I'd say 6 out of our 7 communities previously were not willing to do that or weren't close to it. Only one of our communities said yes to going above it. We'd be looking at reductions, and we'd probably be looking at yearly reductions as our roll-up, depending on what our negotiated agreements are with the association, etc. Our roll-ups are probably going to be over that NEEP index every year if we're at the threshold. So that's part of the context for setting the budget parameter that's important to understand, is that threshold. I think one of the other things, and Finance Committee, interrupt me at any time, one of the other things that we talked about is the context we're in right now with the facilities master plan, which Jen's going to do an amazing presentation in a minute.
Practicing all week.
Yeah, good. And so we're doing a lot of really intense, important work with the community this year, and so not wanting to have this budget cycle also be one where we're really trying to change a lot as we're going through a process to work together to figure out what we want to build for the future. So that's just another context for this budget that I think, and that I think the Finance Committee too thought was an important consideration as we think about what we want to do with the budget in the FY20 year. We talked a little bit about what would, Brittany shared a memo before she left looking at the increases that we were going to be seeing and some of the savings that we found going into FY20. We took a look, we went through the budget as it is right now. We didn't make any changes to it other than what's happening in FY19. We rolled it up 3% in salaries and facilities, supplies, etc. And when we look at all of that together, if our equalized pupils stayed constant, we don't think it's going to, but if it did stay constant, that roll up, without making any tweaks or changes, would be roughly 2.5% increase. Our salary and our healthcare is more than that, but we had savings in other places that brought that number down. So that's not a real number. It's not what it's going to be because we know there are lots of other factors that are going to change the budget, but that's at least a starting point to help us start to wrap our heads around where we are. So that's kind of the best information we have right now in terms of what would a percentage increase mean. Of course, if we lose 10 students, 20 students, 30 students, that has a significant impact on the overall budget, and then that number increases significantly. So if we lost, I think it's 40 students, we would be close to or over the spending threshold.
17.8. We got to lose 50 to hit 17.8.
What is that?
That computer over there?
It's just I think it's just a phone over there.
They're just gonna leave a
Oh,
message.
it's just a,
I'm not sure why they.
we're all like, who is
one's
it?
calling.
It's a funny time to call the high school library.
They're watching and they don't like
It's
the
one of
budget.
our,
it's one of our kids.
I'm happy to take a call if someone needs
Yeah,
it.
we're all here.
they're already at
Like a
us.
telethon.
So that's
Maybe it was some
I
public
think that's
comments.
the
If I don't know
context.
who's calling, I don't answer.
Question, when is the student enrollment number set? Is it
the 15th,
of this month?
December.
Of December, okay,
That's what makes this process so challenging.
okay.
We get the number to build our budget on December 15th, and then we have to be done in a month.
Right.
Okay, but if students leave in March and April, we still go with that number that we got in
Yep.
December? Okay,
Yep. Yeah,
It's an equalized, it's not an actual how many kids are here, it's an equalized pupil
well, I
number,
understand
that's
that,
the
but
average over 2 years.
but the actual census or the number of.
it's
kids-
October.
Oh, okay,
The census is October, and it's 2 years back from October.
okay, okay,
So if a student leaves in November, we've still counted them.
okay,
Yeah. Yep.
okay.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Yes, thank you, Jen.
The estimated percentage,
Yeah.
is that including rolling in the anticipated savings for this year? I think it was like 700 something thousand.
Yeah.
Or is that just savings that would be found from other measures, with operating budget?
No, it's with what we've identified as being both expected increases and expected savings. So the salary savings are built into that.
And are those salary? So I guess I was confused
the-
about that. I thought those were salary savings from this year. Are those
Some of them got into this year, but some people submitted their early retirement, request, that incentive request, after we approved the budget.
Right.
So we only counted roughly half of them,
Okay.
of the 25.
And even though I think you're thinking of the memo that we talked about at the last meeting.
Correct.
That was strictly salary and benefits. It didn't talk at all about I don't think the 11% healthcare premium increase was in there.
I think it was stated in there
Stated.
It
at
was
the
stated
bottom,
in
yeah.
there? Okay.
Yeah.
So, It was just, we thought there was going to be big savings in this area, and we just kind of wanted an idea of how big. And that's the danger of starting to talk about numbers just yet. So we want to try to keep the discussion at the highest macro level that we can right now. Get a sense of, is the board, because if we say keep everything the same, okay, what Peter's saying is that means if we keep everything the same, our costs are automatically going to go up more than the threshold is going to increase. So what we say
over the 2 years.
over the 2 years, right? So if we say 0 increase, that's actually going to implement a lot of cuts because you know all the things that we have to pay, salaries, healthcare, premiums, facilities contracts, those all increase, and so. The idea is to get a sense from the board, what will we tolerate, how close to that threshold do we want to be. Some people are a little more comfortable, a little further away from Armageddon, but so the idea is if we push it now, if we go higher this year, just because we have that opportunity right now, we're going to pay for it next year or the year after, and what Peter's saying is that the optimistic scenario is that everything stays constant at the per pupil equalized level, which is unlikely to happen. So,
and if we counted, we know we lost 50 students at the high school, and that number will be halved. So, if we came back with a number that was 25 down, I wouldn't be surprised. I've tried to predict it before and have been wrong, and every business manager I've talked to will not even try. So I don't want to put that out there as that, it doesn't automatically equate that way. But the high school students are counted for more, so if you think about the system and you think about weighting, if high school students are getting 1.25 instead of 1.0, so you would get more equalized pupil for them. As the system loses students, the numbers are sitting up in secondary, so you don't experience it as much because you're losing students in the elementary, but you're getting more weighting at the top end.
Right.
So the impact could be more significant, not less, in my estimation.
But it's much too complicated to try to
Yeah, I don't think
come up with numbers other than really gross parameters.
Which doesn't make sense. Anytime there's a big number like that, you should be able to replicate it. So just the whole system just doesn't seem to make sense to me, that it's not a number you can...
Well, it doesn't, but we're stuck with it.
I get that. It just seems like we should be advocating for the state to change that formula so
Totally
that we
agree.
can actually try to replicate and predict that formula.
Well, if we could get that today, we would have months to actually do, have these conversations in a way that we could engage the staff and community in a different way.
Right.
As it stands now, you're stuck with doing what we're doing, which I think is the best case scenario of doing as much legwork as you can and being predictive and creating a good ballpark estimate, but not. The second thing you can do is just every year say, if we cut, in September, start talking about cuts and say, if we get equalized people here, we're going to do this. If we get equalized people here, we're going to do this. And you're constantly living in a scenario that is really deficit. And it's hard to build anything and inspire people and grow if you're always thinking about what you're losing. So it's not, I think we're not in a place now to say, to paint a picture of gloom or doom or anything like that. I think we're in a pretty good place. I think we're in a year where we're going to hear in a minute about some really, really important work that has an impact on budget and and how we invest our money and all of that. So I think we're, we're in a good place, and the work that we did last year has put us in a place where we're not in a really challenging place this year. Because we were in FY18, we were at 17.2. So we dropped going into this year.
Is there any current worry or, well, there's probably definitely worry, but is there any realism?
There's
to
always
the,
worry.
Right, that's a silly question. Is there any realism to the language that's currently coming out of the administration is a consideration of what we're spending per pupil for the state of Vermont compared to what certain states are spending that are that's being highlighted at the $7,000 to $9,000 rate per student. And that why aren't we educating our kids at that rate, and that should be our goal. And that is a position that the current administration is taking. How is that playing out in reality? Because
people are laughing.
Okay.
I think, but
I would hope so.
I think
he's not.
Yeah, no, I know. I know. I think to be able to, having come from a place like that, where we spent, I think when I left, we were spending under $7,000. It was like $6,000 per student. So coming from that kind of place, every year in Oregon, we were talking about how are we going to convince the state, because it's a totally different system,
right,
where the state provides the funding, and based on the number of students enrolled, it's not an equalized pupil number. And every year, there was further and further divestment from education and more into other parts of the state budget. And I was talking to the National Superintendent of the Year was from Oregon 2 years ago, and he came and spoke in Stowe a few weeks ago. And so I was talking to him, just catching up about Oregon, what's going on there. And he was saying that he really loves the work, but he's just growing weary of constantly working on trying to get funds for schools, that it's really tiring. Because without the funding, it's really hard to do the work. And morale is really, really low.
Yeah.
Class sizes are really high. And it's just kind of a vicious cycle.
And when you have a model in which 80% of your overall costs are coming in a category of personnel and benefits, and the rate of that increase year over year is consistently greater than the rate of increase from a funding perspective, that math is never going to work.
Nope. It's not.
Ever. And you can't cut your way into that math.
Right. I think the thing that we have, the thing that the governor's talking about is not possible here unless you completely shifted how we're structured. And you'd have to go to county districts. You'd have to increase the scale significantly to even be able to do that. Right. You cannot ask boards to get, reduce costs by 50% a year without really, really significant change.
Okay.
So it's frustrating that you don't go from 17,000 to 7,000 in a term. It's just illogical.
Yeah.
I've also heard that places like California, where taxes or educational taxes are so poor, and the schools are so poorly funded, that it's the communities that have to do a tremendous amount of fundraising, and then you have unequal opportunities based on where you live. So I think Vermont is against that kind of a structure. We want more equalized. So I can't imagine the people of Vermont would go for that. But
yeah,
that's why it's so unequal in so many places. Down south, it's the same way.
Yeah. I think our challenge with equity and funding is we were ranked 49 out of 50 of states in equity because we allow our towns to decide how much they're going to spend. And the, richer towns spend more on education, poorer towns spend less. And that, look at all the towns in Vermont, they all track that way, almost all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Peter or the committee?
And that's what we were supposed to fix, how many years ago?
So the assumption is that the board is concurring
Well, I
with
think that 46
the
gets
general
us
idea
closer.
that Peter's presenting, correct? I mean, I think, because the Finance Committee generally came down in that same place as he sort of presented as far as this real gross number of 2.5 or that range.
Right, so to try to stay conservative without making any drastic changes this year, correct? That's kind of the goal. Okay.
Assuming all the ungivens,
Right.
so to
Exactly.
speak, are there. I mean,
A few will visit us, right?
now, the assumption would also be that you, in preparing for some of these, and after talking with building supervisors and whatever, that you'll have a little idea of how it's just not all going to be new to you on the 17th of December. It'll all be there, at least in a way to start plugging in, and then that's when we will be having further discussions more specifically about those things. Feel a little helpless, honestly. But
Anything more on this topic? Okay.
Except that, Peter, are you comfortable with what, because I didn't hear a motion or anything about a direction.
Well,
There's
it's a
no-
discussion item, so.
well, it's discussion. I don't think it was a motion.
I don't think we need a motion. I mean, I
Okay.
think this gives me just kind of a general sense of where the board is and helps me in working together. And as I mentioned, the Finance Committee, when we bring forward our first draft, that's where, the board will also start to weigh in
Right.
about, this looks good, this seems, challenging or, yeah.
Are we done with this topic? Our next discussion item is the Facilities Master Plan Community Dialogue Events Update.
Awesome.
Take it away, Jen.
So
Do you
I,
want to do this?
yeah, if you don't mind, I just thought to help guide the discussion, I would just show you some of the information that we have on our shared drives, and while we're getting the technology updated, I have some paper to share with you. So we have a trifold handout that we're passing around. We have a very rough looking version of a postcard that we are planning to mail out very soon to all mailing addresses in the district. And there is also a poster that would be anticipated to be in some public areas.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, okay. It's very small.
Here's Chip, here's the postcard. The postcard.
So, obviously there's some blue links in the document, and I can share this with you, where some of these, well, all of these documents live in, there's a Facilities Master Plan Steering Committee team drive as well, and so the balance is like trying to give that committee access to things that only they see without them feeling like we're all like looking in their stuff. So this document lives in our committee, this committee's drive. So if you wanted to look into anything, you can just click on it and request access if you want to.
Go ahead and just share this with everyone.
Is that okay? Well, they see, the thing is, they can see this document. It's the documents that it links to that they may or may not be able to see. Because the documents live in the Facilities Master Plan. So this is in the Planning and Engagement Committee folder. They can see this. So, essentially the data that I am happy to go through with you in any order that you choose to. And what I was trying to say was there are some notes in there from our last committee meeting, is an update at this Facility Master Plan Steering Committee about the data and where it stands, and the Process and Communication group, which they're two separate groups, but essentially the work overlaps. So it's, you know, what's the process of communicating out about the dialogues? What is the message we're sending at the dialogues? What do we want to hear back? And in what ways? And then what's the sort of follow-up? Is the essential information in the process and communication. And then below that, you'll see the communication documents, and those are the documents that I shared with you, as well as a draft of a survey that can be served as an exit survey at the dialogues in paper, and also could be in the town public areas with some information if we have printed information, as well as posted on the website. So we want to see the pamphlet first, clearly, because that's fun.
You handed this out?
Yep.
Okay. So
Yep, that's the trifold. So the idea, that's okay, you can look at it. The idea behind the trifold is to send that home through the schools. I don't know if it was officially decided if it will go home with, you know, one per family, if they can decide, you know, if students are in multiple school buildings, if they can identify, you know, just one per family, or if they'll just send one per school, if that's, you know, easier for the schools to determine, as well as some libraries, town offices, and I think it would make sense to have a few at the schools as well. So the idea would be there's, you know, a bunch of those trifold handouts, you know, in your town office with perhaps a poster that highlights that. So what our group just now mentioned was, have we considered translating it into other languages? The poster, at least, we had decided we could at least, you know, just translate the language in the poster and put it, you know, hang it next to the original poster. And if we felt strongly about translating the trifold that's going home with students to families that are already receiving information translated, that we could pursue that. And that's just kind of some of the details about how that would actually happen. And if you look at it carefully, you'll see that there is some, there's some cutting off at the bottom of some of the pages. So just for me to remember to double check with, I think it's Sharon that has it now, because I think it's been officially approved, to make sure that whatever version they're getting back proofed from the printer doesn't have it cut off, because that wouldn't be good. I think it's just the Google Doc, you know, kind of acting funky. Any thoughts, questions, or concerns about the brochure? We thought the overall feel was welcoming and friendly, trying to include some pictures and some of the essential information, mostly from the planning document that you're all familiar with. It was designed by Mary Heather Noble, who is on the steering committee with us, and I think she did a good job of just really pulling the information and putting it in a digestible way. And if you've seen the poster or will want to click on the poster, it's just very simple. You have a big idea again. And she chose the picture of the kids sort of holding up this thing that kind of looks like we're all inviting everybody to come. Oh, darn. I'm logged in as me. Why would you need access? Oh, because it just said it was somebody else. There you go. Yeah, so, that's me. I'm not available right now to take your call. That's so weird. Unless you sign up other Google accounts. Do I need to sign out of here? Maybe that's what's going on. I'll just... Well, she was already in. Let me just close all my Google stuff. I don't think we're supposed to see that. You're just going in.
You can log in as me and access it.
I don't understand why. I've never seen that. We'll see all your stuff.
So Jen,
Yes, sir.
give me a sort of general idea of the open-endedness or directed-endedness of the 3 public forums.
Are you like saying what's it gonna all look like?
Well, if I come to the forum thinking I'm going to be discussing long-range planning,
Yep.
then what would I be expecting at that point?
Yep. Let's go to
Right.
the process document next, because I think
Okay.
that will help you understand.
Good. I mean, I figured you might, but I just.
Yep. Yeah, this is going to kind of give you the quick overall of what you
Yeah.
should expect. And that's
Right.
what the goal is. So you can tell us if we're right or wrong. It just basically gives you we're going to discuss that our mission statement, the alignment of the educational goals with she specifies the strategic plan, but that's basically the educational goals with the facilities and enrollment realities. That's kind of our main sentence. Discuss, add your voice to the discussion, essentially, and it says when they are.
Right.
So it's just trying to be eye-catching of, come. Oh, and just to point out to all of you the dates. So we had mentioned before we were thinking of the 8th, November 8th, but there is can you tell me what it is? Resiliency meeting. It's a district-wide. It's not an ACSD, but it's county-wide resiliency conversations that I think we were all invited to as well, or at least some of us might have been. And so we felt like that was a big enough conflict that we didn't want to have it that night. So it's the morning of November 3rd and the evenings of November 13th and 14th are the dates. It'd be awesome if you could all come. And our role would not be expected to be in any active participation role,
Right.
but just to kind of be there and maybe help, guide a question or answer a concern that somebody might have about, where the school board might be going with something, if that's the case. So, if you don't mind, let's go up to the process and communication. That will help.
Okay.
It's a nicely put together document. So this first section here talks about basically what we've been looking at, in addition to the postcard. So this is to get people out there, and they're also, in addition to perhaps, or just, with these documents, something for the principals to be able to share with their school communities in case, and maybe parents groups in case they're interested. The trifold, and the postcard, and then we would put everything that we have once it's finalized on the website, and we've all seen that. So the dialogues, those are the dates. That obviously is in yellow because we had highlighted that as a problem and found a second date. Is he going to change it?
I can work on this later.
That's a good idea. Okay. So what are you going to expect when you go to these dialogue meetings? So initially, it would be a presentation. Well, first, when you walk in the door, we'll encourage you to sit with people that you don't normally sit with or know very well to kind of mix up the group. But we toyed with, assigned seating and thought that might be a little harsh. So just to try to, diversify the groups, because those will be the same groups that they'll be talking with. Then there'll be a presentation, starting, kind of setting the scene of what are the goals here, what are we doing, and acknowledging that this conversation is coming on the heels of the 6th grade discussion that, kind of made it clear that there are some bigger questions and consequences of, any of the decisions, and we want to make sure that we're thinking them through. So, so to acknowledge that, explain what this process will be, to really focus on ACSD as a whole. And then, getting into what are the educational goals, what are our facilities' realities, the demographics that we have, the realities of the facilities, And then this concept of the grand challenges. So it's basically that, you know, it's a challenge, both exciting and daunting, that, you know, we want everybody to participate in. And so after the presentation of the data, I don't think he's going to do questions and answers, but I suppose if there's a few minutes he could, then we would encourage the groups to talk about what they've heard in the small groups. And so that's where we come in. We would be maybe at the tables or even floating, and the steering committee members would also be there to support the table discussions. And at each table, there would be very broad, general guiding questions. So we'd all talked about the more specific questions that are in the planning document. And it's, to some people, it felt like maybe that was almost too directed, and we wanted to make sure that the idea was there, that you know, we really wanted to hear the ideas as organically as they could be. So if you want to read them, I can read them. The purpose of the future planning: to offer high quality education that is sustainable and equitable based on the data. Are there changes you would suggest making to support the greatest success for our students? And then to follow on that, you know, every suggestion or change has an impact. What would be the impact of that change? Positive.
So that's the table answering that question.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
And in what way are they answering it? Are they filling out a survey that then you'll read, or they're going to then present it to the whole group, or what?
Yeah, so this initial part is just a conversation, just to kind of share your thoughts and listen to the people at your table and hear their perspectives, which may or may not impact your perspective, but it's good to hear. And then once they get through those questions, they're at each table we have our pens and pencils, ample sticky notes, copy of the guiding questions, so the more specific guiding questions, if people are feeling like they need some more structure, and then dots for the continuum walk. And so at some point as they're talking, if people feel inclined to, you know, to start writing, or once, you know, the conversation has died down, or we've instructed people to start on the continuum walk, that's when then people might put an idea that they feel strongly about or questioning on their sticky notes, and then place them sort of on the wall, which we're calling the continuum walk. And the idea of the continuum walk is not to sort of make people feel like they have to be in one category or one strict feeling, but it'll literally be this big long piece of paper with a range on the continuum from I feel worried about the future and the change it might bring, to I see mostly opportunities and potential changes, and they can put their dot of how they feel anywhere along that, anticipating some version of a bell curve potentially, and that they would also then put their sticky notes that would correlate to those feelings along that continuum as well.
With their ideas?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So looking for concrete ideas, concrete, you know, feedback on, you know, what they're seeing and what they feel, you know, could be a valid suggestion for the ACSD board to take on based on the data that they saw.
So then you take that data that's collected by the committee, this long piece of paper with dots on it,
Yep.
and your bell curve, and then you as a committee will process that in a way to come up with what the conclusion, or what, not a conclusion, but what
The
It's one data
community's
point.
feeling.
what
the trend?
What is the trend of feelings of the people that were present?
At each of those meetings, yep. And there's a
then-
data committee that would
And
focus
that eventually, you collate that and.
Yep.
and do that. Okay,
Yep. So that's one method of collecting data.
right, yeah. no, I
The
understand.
survey that we linked in that, and it's just a super rough draft, just started it this weekend, mimics some of those questions in Continuum as a way for, if people didn't feel like I'm out of here, I'm not, you know, doing this touchy-feely Continuum walk, I'm done, they can go home, or, you know, I feel like I need to think about this longer, I don't even know what this data is, I need to absorb it. They can leave, they can, you know, read more about it online and digest it more for themselves. They can do an online survey. They can take a piece of paper survey on their way out if they want to do that. And just, you know, also they can just submit feedback, you know, on the website or via email as well. So there'll be multiple methods for collecting the data, but that continuum walk, we see as one major method.
But I'm sorry, Lorraine, I don't.
Will there be people from your committees at each table to kind of guide the conversations along?
Yep, they felt strongly, like a lot of us felt strongly, they didn't want to be facilitators. But for sure, their role is not to be participants in stating their feelings. Their role is like our role to kind of be there and help, maybe moderate the discussion a little, maybe help ask some of the prompting questions, whether from the guiding questions or, keep things on task.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Yep. So it's kind of them and us together, and kind of wherever we're all feeling like we're needed, we would try to distribute ourselves.
And how large groups are you thinking? Like 8, 10 at a table, or how small, how large?
Right. I guess it depends on the table reality. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the tables are like in these places, but yeah, that's the goal number.
And will we have either a presentation from you or access to the information that Bob is going to share at the beginning, so that we know what he's going to say before he says it?
Right. I will defer to the 2 members of the data committee to answer that question of when we might actually see the slides. The data update doesn't talk about that.
Sure he might be working on slides. I think right now he's just working on compiling all of the data, and I think he's hunting down some of the building level data right now that he still needs to gather. That was, I think, going to be a coordination between Bruce and the building principals. So I think he's pretty close, and he can certainly share it with everyone.
Because I just would imagine
we're talking about the data, the raw data itself, about.
Well, it's if you scroll up, you talk about he's going to share demographics and
facilities.
Yeah, no,
right there.
Right there. He's going to share current demographics, data facilities.
Yeah.
So the data committee is meeting again on Thursday afternoon, and hopefully we'll have all of the pieces that we've requested by then, and looking at what is the best way to provide the information without feeling like we're pushing it in one. So the most objective data that we can get around specific pieces.
So by Thursday, you should hope to have the data, so then perhaps the following week will be a draft of the presentation once you've signed off on the actual data and view of the data.
Right, and I think we'd have to figure out exactly how much of the presentation the data committee does versus other.
Doesn't this say Bob's doing it?
Yeah.
And this
Can
part,
you scroll up just a...
Bob's presenting.
He's presenting.
25 minutes.
I guess we need to clarify that with
Yes.
Bob on whether Bob...
And it's probably just worth getting like the 3 chairs of the committees together with Bob to have that conversation, to figure out that.
Because that's really,
in terms of
a lot to
his
print.
presentation and who's involved has not been, we haven't gotten to that point yet. This is the structure, though, overall, of what he will be leading this part of the presentation, whether he carries it for 25 or whether other people pop up and discuss is yet to be determined.
But that would seem, how that's presented, I would think is important, because obviously, we don't want to, none of us are coming in with absolute bias on any of this, I don't think. I mean, we'll eventually have some bias by how it comes about, but for this early stage, I think presenting that data is, even though it may be obvious data, it can't have a bias in it.
Right.
Right, but it's also the most important part of the whole thing.
Yeah, it is. If you're going to reach the end of your conclusion, which, of consolidation and causing better education and, using your facilities in the most efficient.
Right, and we're trying to gather data that can help respond to the guiding questions that the board had agreed to.
And the reason Bob is leading this is because he's the only one without bias in some ways, because he's not in the district. So if I got up there and presented for 25 minutes, I think I could be fairly objective
Right.
That's my own bias.
But nobody else would perceive it that way.
No one else would see it. They would see me up there and they would attribute all sorts of
Yeah.
things to it, right?
Yep.
So-
Right, yeah, that's,
So that's the goal.
But I think his goal is going to be to lay out, really to riff off of what the board has already established in that planning document around what the grand challenges are, around, I mean, the data speaks for itself, I think. And also a need to respond to it in some way, to be thoughtful about planning for the future. But he's not going to walk down any kind of path from there.
Mary, did you want to ask something?
My only question is, are the financial realities going to be discussed during the data presentation?
Data people?
There's some budgetary.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Just another question. Is there, I had looked in board pack, is there a list of who's on this steering committee? Because I feel like I've probably seen these people around and I'm not.
It's on the planning document.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
At the end of the planning document.
The updated planning document.
It's on the website, and I think you got sent a copy, but
Okay.
I'll pull it up and show you where it is.
I just feel badly if they're doing all this work and I'm not acknowledging it when I see them at the supermarket.
There are a lot of people that you probably see at the supermarket.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that are very familiar to many of us.
Here's the list.
Where is it?
What they do.
Yeah, we have them in the chart here where we all are. You're there.
Oh, right.
You swim by them. Yep. There. They know us. There.
Community members.
Well, and some of the, yeah, because that's basically, and then students. Were either one of them at our last meeting? I don't think so.
Sam was at one of them.
Yeah, but I don't think he was at the, I don't think either
I don't
were
think
at
he
the
was at the last one, no.
I want to make sure they're at the forums.
Yes.
Yeah, that works.
I think we went through everything pretty much in the document. It was just kind of invite questions like everybody's done. Any concerns that anybody may have. Like I said, in the document that we were starting with, our subcommittee had identified a couple of things to follow up on, like the translation piece. There's also some language that we refer to the grand challenges, but we're not sure that we do it in a way that's strong enough that really explains what the grand challenges are. So we're not sure if we want to pull back on that if possible, and just kind of stick with the facilities master plan steering committee stuff, which we felt like was a mouthful. But that does seem to be where some of these documents have gone. We're at the very late stages where Sharon's trying to get these off to the printer, so I'm not sure on the timeline on some of that. But at least on most of the documentation, we can pull back on the grand challenges if we feel like it's just going to add confusion and one more thing to figure out.
Does anyone have any further questions or comments for Jen? Or
Would comment, it sounds pretty good to me.
Thank you.
Huge amount of work.
Yes, and,
Congratulations, I mean,
yeah.
whoa.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like we're right before a big party, and I feel like we're kind of ready, but not everything's really there yet, but I feel like it's all going to be fine. Like, you're never going to be 1,000% ready for something like this, and given more time, we would still find more things to do, so it's a little bit scary, but I feel like it's going to be great no matter what.
You're putting something in the paper.
Yes. Sharon was following up with John Flowers
I
to...
I have a date with him tomorrow, actually.
Really?
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
So fabulous. Yep, that was part of the communications plan. Everything held on the dates, and so until last Wednesday's meeting, we couldn't do any publications, we couldn't, contact the paper. So it was like, once everybody could agree on that, which was a last second thing, then we can start rolling.
Are you offering any childcare those evenings, or even during the Saturday?
Yeah, it had come up, and it was a challenge of then who's responsible for it, and how do we manage it, and how do we pay for it. The conversation did not come to a conclusion where we actually arranged for something. It was more of a theoretical conversation with this could happen and that could happen. If we feel strongly about that, it's not too late to try to do something about that, and I can bring that suggestion back. There are complications with it. Somebody has to do that.
Right.
Yeah. There has to be a space for it. It's.
I know it's complicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So
I think it is
the
nice
level-
to say, if anybody needs it, will you contact us? And so that nobody's left out if they want to participate, but they can't because of childcare.
Yeah, to offer it, we'd have to have a plan in place. What we talked about more was encouraging people, if they live in a town where somebody might not be able to drive at night, to offer people a ride. That was
Carpooling,
something
yeah,
that we
sure.
were focusing on as well. Everybody's going to have a thing, right? So it's like, what thing do you focus on the most? Like I said, we didn't get there. If you feel as a group that you want us to pursue the child care, I can pass it along.
I know we did offer it during the red studies, I remember that. But, that's not saying that it has to be offered.
When I think of the number of single-parent homes, they're going to be completely locked out because they won't have anybody to watch their kids.
Okay.
So I think it's important to offer it, at least for one of the sessions, so that if we don't offer it for all three, we say this is this time when, parents who need childcare can come.
When I can get back into my Google Doc, I will make a note of that. Anything else?
Any other?
Perhaps I missed it, but how did you estimate how many people would be there? Like what your turnout is going to be? Is there a...
You're assuming we did.
Oh, okay. Well, you were saying 8 people at a table, and
That was
That was
range.
mine, I was just,
okay.
assuming like a round table, are they thinking like, 8 people? You don't want it so large that people don't want to talk, but,
Within the tables, the overall attendance,
Yeah.
we got the biggest spaces that we have access to in the district, hoping that that's enough and that it doesn't also feel too cavernous. The idea is also if we need to break into, some different rooms for some of the discussions that we can.
Voting that night, so.
But we don't, it's hard knowing not, it's hard telling not knowing, right? We are trying to advertise it so that it can be accessible to as many people as want to come. We hope a lot of people want to come, but we're not taking RSVPs or anything.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Jen, again, thank you for the really tremendous amount of work you guys have done. Most important work we'll be doing this year, so thank you.
There'll be lots of work once this is done of trying to, make some sense out of it as well that we'll all be a part of.
And just, I don't know if people remember, Mary also took Peter's spot on the steering committee as well.
It's been awesome, super helpful.
Yeah, the
Thank
thanks
you.
went to all the
Yes,
committee.
I took it as the collective thanks to the steering
No, I was
committee
just-
and
I
the
just-
planning and engagement committee.
Yes, Mary, thank you for stepping into that. Okay.
Right. You signed up.
You asked for it.
Glad you did, yeah.
While we're waiting for,
You're too good, Mary.
Waiting for light.
while we're waiting for light, the next thing on the agenda is other. Is there any other? No other? Peter, do you have any other?
I don't.
Okay. No other, so that leaves us to the last thing. Adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Okay. Victoria.
Victoria and
All in
Mary, yeah.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
meeting.
Thank you.
We are adjourned at,
Vicki, I have those.